When an ordinary girl accidentally becomes the fiancée of the werewolf king, her life changes forever. She must face the pressures from the kingdom and resist the dark forces that want to destroy their love. Chapter 41. A Tamed Wolf. Okay, now that the matter with the changing of the rules is out of the way, let's get started on our history class, Gabriel said, trying to deviate the students' attention, fearing someone might find a flaw in his announcement or the reason behind it. Really, he even had to miss the meeting with the council for it. Can any of you tell me, what are the great taboos that have incurred the wrath of the goddess in our long history? Gabriel asked, grabbing his book, while he leaned in front of his desk. No one. He asked again, when he saw not one of the 10 students raising their hands. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Can you tell us? He looked towards the girl, like a teacher who would appoint the student he favored in class. If she did not know the answer to his question, then none of them knew. The 7 great taboos committed along history are the acts collectively known as the peccati predecessor, the sins of the predecessors. They are the only times a mistake made by a particular creature made the goddess take actions with her own hands. Celia answered easily. Thank you. Indeed, as we all know, each and every creature under the rule of the goddess, whether we are talking about vampires, werewolves, fairies and so on, all have free will, which means that, as long as one does not commit one of the 7 sins, generally the goddess will never intervene in the creature's lives. But in our history, unfortunately, these 7 taboos have been broken at least once. Well, there will always be some idiot who will think the goddess will not intervene, that she did in some way or another each time. Can any of you enumerate them for me? Gabriel inquired again and, seeing that no one dared again, asked Celia to answer. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Can you enumerate them? Yes. Having been assigned Latin numbers, the peccati predecessors of the sins of the predecessors are I.N.U.S. the eating of the flesh of mermaids, which grants eternal life to the eater. I.I.D.O. the stealing of a black dragon's inverted scale, which grants the stealer ownership of said dragon. E.T.R.S. the creation of artificial werewolves, or commonly known as lycans, which granted a human the powers of a werewolf. I've equal to the stealing of the ashes of a phoenix before it could revive, which granted the stealer the power of regeneration, even healing him on the brink of death. The Kuenku the use of black magic to summon a demon by a witch, which granted the said witch 3 wishes. Thy hex of the creation of more than 100 ghouls by a pure blood vampire, effectively creating and anti-dharmi. Vi septum the killing of any ruler of any type of supernatural creatures, directly appointed by the goddess. See, you said, finally sighing relieved, as she finished the enumeration. Thankfully, this was one of the things she reviewed the day before. Yes, thank you very much. That's an accurate description. Indeed, any of those particular facts will undoubtedly incur the wrath of the otherwise gentle goddess. And one of the proofs of incurring her anger is the killing of the queen of all the dragons, by the white dragons, said Gabriel to prove his point, and the fact that the 7 taboos were real, not myths, as they were rumored nowadays. Teacher, I didn't know there are white dragons. I thought there are only black ones. Asked Liam, a fact known by all of them. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There are no white dragons now, but there were before, long ago. Enthusiasm. The goddess informed the dragons of the identity of their future queen, who was until that point a normal village girl, a bit naughty and easily controllable. The young girl was led by the white dragons into their palace, teaching and actively transforming her in a puppet ruler, instead of grooming her as an actual leader and showing her how to really use her power. Nyx, the queen fell in love with a black dragon, and one of the dragons had disapproved the white dragons' use of their queen for their own purposes. The frictions between the two factions led to a terrible war between the black dragons and the white ones, a war which ended in tragic deaths, as the Queen of the Dragons lost control of her powers in grief for her lost lover, who had fallen on the battleground moments earlier, effectively decimating alone more than half of the entire population of dragons and herself in the process. Gabriel explained a part of the general history. But I don't understand. Why do you say the goddess intervened? If the queen killed herself, and did not die by another dragon's hand? Jerk asked, intrigued by the story, which seemed more like a fairy tale rather than actual history, because the dragons more or less indirectly participated in her loss. And because to maintain their superiority on the battlefield against the black dragons at that time, they had feasted on the queen's wings, which had the ability to continuously regenerate their wounds. They spilled her blood and caused her harm, without a care for her well-being, up till she lost control of her powers. Gabriel fervently explained, glad that he had managed to capture the students' attention. History was his favorite subject to teach. As such, they committed the seventh taboo. They killed their own ruler. This incurred the goddess' anger, and their total annihilation. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Today there are still black dragons alive. You will never find a white one. The moment the queen died, all the white dragons, even the ones that had not participated in the war, fell ill and died soon after. It was rumored that the white dragons that did not take part in the war still had a part in the goddess' anger, because of their passivants. The black dragons at least fought for their queen, but the white ones who did not actively fight against them also did not help her. Another point you should remember is that for us werewolves, the leadership of all the werewolves is given from the father to his pup, so the king's position is inherited, but the mate of the king has long been thought of as being decided by the goddess, as she decides which werewolf possessed the queen's half-a-soul. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We do not have clear evidence for this, as the goddess never ascertained it herself, like she did for the dragons, and also a queen of ours has never died from unnatural causes. So I cannot tell you what would happen if someone were to murder our king, but the murder of a future queen could potentially cause an even greater calamity that could befall on us. If this fact would turn out to be true, frankly spoke Gabriel. In truth, at the time when he took Celia to help Solas with his treatment, he indeed had acted rashly. He was one of the most competent officials in the kingdom and one who would generally coldly judge a situation and act accordingly. But at that time he lost his cool, seeing his friend hurt that badly, and Celia's identity as the mate's king was also not certain. He asked for her help, but if she had died, would the goddess have done something to them? Not to mention only this, but also the fact that all the council members and him had tried to find a mate for Solas. If Solas had not waited for Celia, would this have also impacted them in some way? The seventh taboo only mentioned the killing of a ruler. It never said anything about forcing the king to accept his mate, as the goddess would not force mates together. Not that any king in the past had refused his mate, so this fact could not be checked for certain either. He sighed relieved that these questions would only remain what-if questions, and continued with his lesson. By this point all the students' attentions were fully on him. Now then, returning to the dragons. Do not judge them too harshly. We also have our own foolish werewolves. From enthusiasm from the distant past it is widely known that werewolves cannot bite a human and left to that bite, because the said human could possibly transform into an artificial werewolf. There is a small chance of that happening, about 1 in 10. 0, but the transformation in an artificial werewolf is still there. Can any of you tell me, why do we call the surviving bit inhuman an artificial werewolf? Asked Gabriel, and seeing that Evan raised his hand, nodded for the latter to answer. Because werewolves, normally, are born with 2 sides, a human one and a wolf one, but humans, by becoming an artificial werewolf through a bite, would not possess a wolf side, They would not have a distinct personality inside their minds granted by the goddess, so would never be able to transform into a real wolf, only partially transforming into a chimera of sorts, a lichen. Gabriel nodded, satisfied by his answer, as it was correct, then added more details to Evan's description. Yes, an artificial werewolf can never become a real werewolf, and thus would also never even have a proper mate, as the mates are separated into halves before birth. Not born as werewolves, they would not have a soul shared with another werewolf. Now here lays the problem. It is difficult for a werewolf to transform a human into a lichen, but once that human becomes a lichen, the possibility of him transforming another human into a lichen increases. 1 in 10 bitten humans become a lichen if they are bitten by him, with the 9 left untransformed, dying in the process. And also, lichens are savage creatures that cannot maintain their sanity. They viciously and indiscriminately attack everyone in their way, and they get more savage and mindless as the one who transformed them gets transformed by a lichen further away from the original lichen, the first one to be bitten by the werewolf. Even human towns are left destroyed in their plunder, which could lead to our exposure to the humans, as opposed to new empires, who retain their mind and have some control to their newfound instinct. You see, the goddess has maintained a frail equilibrium with the human world, as she has only dominion over the supernatural creatures, but would never dare to hurt others, even the humans that are not under her rule, not to mention that lichens are to her imperfect wolves, a mutation to her creation, incurring the goddess's fury. The werewolf who would break this taboo by creating a lichen would immediately die, along with whoever would help him do so, regardless of what type of creature that is. But teacher, why would a werewolf ever want to do that? Why would he or she transform a human into a lichen? Asked Marcus, confused. Why would any werewolf break the taboo and kill himself? Well, now in our time, no werewolves under the king would, but at one point before, in the distant past, when the packs were not yet united under one werewolf, they were severely hunted, though some rash decisions were made. Some werewolves just bit the hunters, thinking that creating lichens would make the other hunters refrain from attacking them, seeing that members of their families were also werewolves. But the fact was that they did not take note of how hard it was to create a lichen. They would have to kill thousands of hunters to create just one of them. In the end, they did not manage to create even one, and only got more hunted by the revenge-fueled hunters. To put a stop to their foolishness, the goddess created that taboo, and in a way it was also for their protection. As watchers, even though your main duty is to ensure the protection for members of a pack against a cruel alpha, you will also have other obligations. Ensuring that the 7 taboos are not broken is one of them. Now then, please take note that the 7 broken taboos will consist as material for the final exam, so please study them properly. By next Monday, please research at least one of the other 6 cases in which the taboos have been broken, other than the one we have discussed today. Your report should have at least 2,000 words. Let's continue with the war that happened 30 years ago. Before beginning the meeting with the council members, to discuss the information about the attacks, Solos took the phone out of his pocket and checked the time. At this hour, Celia would still be attending courses. If he remembered her schedule correctly, she previously had history course, and now would be in the training course. As she would not be able to answer his phone call, she would keep the phone with her in the classroom. He made sure of that. But during training, perhaps, she would not be able to carry it around. It was several hours ago that they parted, and he was already missing her. How would he be able to hold on until Friday? Would the petite woman also miss him? He pondered, hoping that she would. Having no other option, he at least thought to send a message. I miss you, my lovely fiancée. Please, let me know where you want to take me to, for the date you wanted. I am available this weekend. He smirked as he sent the message and returned the phone to his pocket. Several minutes later, all the members of the council took their seats so the meeting could begin. Normally, he would be last to appear, but as he drove Celia to the academy, He showed up earlier at the council's office and summoned them all earlier. Your Highness, before we begin our talk about the attacks, we would like to offer our sincere congratulations for finding your mate, said one of the council members, followed immediately by the others. They had already been informed of this by Emery, with the latter bragging about the fact he was the first to see Her Majesty in her new status. Thank you. Don't worry, you will all get to see her in due time. I can only hope that this settles your mind and will stop interfering with my personal life. With the last part using a harsher tone, slightly guilty, Emery coughed to hide his embarrassment. He had indeed reflected on his behavior. He knew that he had sinned towards the Queen. Would Her Majesty keep a grudge on him? Perhaps. Solas was right, he truly was becoming a child. He should be more careful in the future. Then should we start to talk about the information we gathered, Your Highness? Emery said, trying to deviate the subject. Even if he was regretful of what he had done, in front of the king he would never admit it. Solas nodded and did not insist on his words. The attack was the most important right now. If the attackers were not dealt with, he would not be able to have Celia in her proper position as the Queen. The council members, Micah, Gabriel and Jenna, the most powerful mate he had at the palace, were the only ones who knew about her. But more and more people could find out. The attackers dared at times to enter his borders. What would stop them to enter a third time? And knowing of the existence of the Queen, they might attack her to weaken him. He could not risk her life. And from the information Gabriel and his team has collected so far, and from Her Majesty, we know the following. 1. The attackers have someone on the inside. They knew His Majesty will not be present in the palace during the Hunters' attack. We have pinpointed some people, and have already released a bit of fake information to them. Now we are waiting to see which of the information make its way outside. Based on that, we hope to determine the exact source of the leak. 2. They used witches when they attacked. But as our connection with the covens is a bit strained right now, it is a bit difficult to determine if some of the witches are missing from their covens or have fled of their own free will. The witches also keep refusing to talk with us, reasoning that their leader is currently away, so before she returns they will not say anything. Micah shared the information he and Gabriel had compiled in a report. All they could know of the attack and are actually collaborating with the attackers. Perhaps they are trying to hide it. They were the one who started the war 30 years ago. When they broke the fifth taboo, said one of the council members, having no trust in the witches. It is not likely they know. The witches have a curse placed on them since the war, to not engage in fights with any creature. The curse should still be in effect for at least 20 more years. And also the current leader is a white witch, as opposed to 30 years ago. So we highly doubt that it is an action from the covens as a whole, and not just 1 or 2 witches. They could be solitary witches or new witches born after the last war. If the hunters found them when they had just discovered their powers, then it is possible to have them under their control. Also, Her Majesty said the hunters had on his neck amulet, which he used to nullify the spell for a bit. We found the amulet on the ground when we cleaned the forest. It is the one a witch cannot be without. She would never willingly give it away. The battle explained, before resuming to read the report. Beep. One of the phones rang, just as all of them concentrated on the meeting. The phones should be closed during the meeting. You all know that. Just who left their phones opened? Asked Emery with his voice raised upset. They were discussing something very important. There could be no interruptions. Beep. The phone rang again, just as Solas was taking it out of his pocket. Emery had wanted to keep admonishing the council members, but swallowed his words when he saw the king taking his phone out. What date are you talking about? The message on Solas's phone said, I never said I would take you out on a date, said the second message, making Solas brightly smile, as he was already picturing Sia's flustered face. The date you wished for the ball. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your hard-earned date, he replied happily, imagining an even more speechless face. Perhaps she would even call him shameless again. Coming from her sweet mouth, the word resembled more of a compliment, rather than an insult. He was so immersed in the messages he was exchanging with the petite woman that he did not bother to look around him. If he did, he would see 13 faces looking absolutely stunned at the small smile that adorned his face. Unknown to Sia, she had become the most respected werewolf woman in their minds, and not only because she was their queen, just for the fact she managed to tame the big bad wolf. Enough with my rambles. Here is a little scene for your amusement. Asola's kept her hand interlocked with his. On their date, and even when they had to briefly separate, he would immediately search for her hand again to hold it. Celia's embarrassment only grew more each time, until she finally could not take it anymore. In the cinema room, can we not hold hands? At least not like this. Just lightly touch. With her cheeks getting redder. Why are you shy? Solos asked, smiling. But seeing the petite woman pouting a little dissatisfied, immediately explained. You don't have to be. No one is watching. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please let me hold it. But there are people watching, she said, upset. There is no one. We are alone in the cinema room. Not understanding to who she was referring to. Of course there are, she said, upset, and got a little closer to whisper in his ear, an act he immediately approved of. He loved seeing her approaching him of her own accord. Oh. Don't worry. It does not bother them at all, he immediately said, looking to where she was also looking, but that does not mean that it makes it any less embarrassing, she simply said, with a hand he was not holding covering her cheeks. I know you are shy, but the readers have been here since the beginning. I assure you it really does not bother them. I can even do this and no one will say a word about it. They might even encourage me to do so, Salas assured her, leaning in to give her a small peck on the Chapter 42. The informant. She drove for a really long time. Perhaps it was more than 55 hours ago since she left her home. And, even though she absolutely hated to drive herself for such a long time, she had no choice but to. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Considering that no one should know of the person she was meeting, a person she hated to see, but was the only one who could help her now, she was already steadily losing all her patience on the way to this dark, gloomy place. Then she lost even more as she went through all the checkups. But now, waiting in front of the massive mahogany doors, her mood had shifted entirely. Her palms started to sweat nervously and kept getting colder no matter how much she held them together, trying to warm them up. This chilling, icy place seemed to freeze her down to her very core, that she could not tell you if her slight tremble was because of the cold, numbing atmosphere or of the coldness of the voice that summoned her inside held. To what do I owe the pleasure of your presence? The cold, hoarse voice impossibly spoke. Kneeled before him, she had still not dared to raise her head up to look at him, regardless of how beautiful and ethereal his appearance was. Beneath that beautiful sculpted face adorned with grey eyes and platinum blonde hair, a monster hid. I need your help, she stutteringly said, half regretting the choice she made in coming here. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Help. Oh, but have I not helped you already? The cold man stated. He was calm, but it did not soothe her all. All who knew him could tell his calmness was only a fade. The calm before the storm. Now was the time you were supposed to help me. Wasn't it so? So then why have you come to me for help? Have you accomplished your end of the bargain, so that you could dare have another wish? Or because it has been decades already? Have you forgotten about the initial arrangement? He continued without waiting for her to answer the first question. His questions made her kneel even more in submission. Even though this person was not her king and could not demand from her to do so. Even though they were not even of the same race. Scared of his pressing aura, she had no choice but to bend even more. I have tried to help as much as I could. I have informed you when His Highness was not in the palace last time. and even when they were getting closer to finding something about you in the past. Even now, I also come with the information that Solas has successfully interrogated the men he captured when they entered the forest to kidnap the students. Please believe me, it is not my intention to fool you. It took time for me to prepare myself to the level that the council would consider me as a potential queen, because without their backing he would not spare another glance to me, just like he had done in the past to many others. Not to mention, with me coming closer to him on my own will, I would have instantly been dismissed. And now, just as everything was falling in its rightful place, there's another disturbance that keeps interfering, one who must be eliminated at any costs. Without it out of the way, things would surely go in my favor, she expressed desperately. You want to use me again? Did we not agree last time that you will handle the rest on your own? The man asked her while he began to tap his fingers. She realized that he was getting impatient with her. Each time this man tapped his fingers, in the next few moments someone's head would fly off. And now she was the only one in the room. Why yes, but I have no other way. My grandfather had barely included me in the list of potential candidates, and a head council member had also supported me from all the others. But just as I thought my actions would bear fruit, he has changed. And not only him, even the head council member changed too. The woman trembling said, it had all run smoothly. All her preparations were complete. All for the day when she would stand above all. If it weren't for that little. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nothing but excuses. When you asked me to get rid of your mate, you were very confident in your abilities. Yvonne, you assured me you would be the queen. Now you blame your failure on others. Where has your confidence disappeared to? I wonder. The man asked her, smiling a bit, a smile that did not reach his eyes. I was confident. I still am. But if it wasn't for TH, Yvonne quickly countered, with an aggrieved voice. Lysiason, littered with arrogance she regretted immediate. She knew from the past just how much this man cared about etiquette, just how important it was to him for everyone who came, whether it was his subject or not, to kneel and deeply bow. Just that. Her injustice got the better of her. Now, as a consequence, she could barely breathe through the constricted neck that kept on getting more and more suffocated, as he tightened his hold on it. Luckily, she still had her feet just barely touching the ground supporting her body, or the current situation would resemble with a noose tightened above her neck, killing her almost immediately. It terrified her, as the man seemed determined to kill her. Without waiting any longer, he kept increasing the choke further. Lover, was the only word she managed to utter with great difficulty, hoping that the curiosity to know more would prolong her life. Enthusiasm? Asked the man, loosening only at the joke, to barely allow her to explain more. An explanation that could cost her the life she was seconds away from losing. Would it not be satisfactory? Why, yes. Solace is. Change is due. To a lover. Someone. Even the council acknowledges. She managed to say slowly through ragged breaths of air. Oh, was it his mate? The man asked her, seemingly indifferent, loosening even more his hold. But she was still not assured the danger had passed, as his eyes seemed to burn in anger. Was it still because of her, or was it because of the information she shared? I don't think so, because if it was this, then the head council member would have not brought me to the ball still trying to introduce me to Solas. No one would ever try to interfere between the bond of a member of the royal family and his mate. One could be exiled, or even killed if one tried to do so. The mate of the king, more so, is the most respected werewolf after him, as she was chosen by the goddess, and Solas has also not marked her yet, even though he was supposed to mark her immediately after finding his mate. She tried to explain with a hoarse voice, as she was massaging her now freed neck. But you said earlier that even the council is not backing you anymore. Which one is it? Why would he help before and then immediately dismiss you? The man reasoned, as he was returning to his throne. He had appeared to not listen to her reasons before, But he had indeed paid attention to her words. "I do not know. That is why I wanted your help. I want to get rid of that little thief." She appeared out of nowhere, and in just a little time has the king wrapped around her little finger. She treats the royal palace as her home. She is even permitted access to his mother's garden, a garden no one was allowed to step in before. Yvonne explained aggrieved, but now toned down her arrogance. "The royal indoor garden?" asked the man, as he returned to tapping his fingers, action that unsettled Yvonne a lot, making her give in more details than necessary to convince the man it was not her fault. Yes, the royal garden was the favorite spot in the entire royal palace. Ursula's mother, even after her death, he has maintained it and did not allow anyone to enter before. But she was sitting comfortably on the grass reading a book in that very place. Instead of staying on the designated pathway to not harm the plants, she even had the audacity to stop me from touching a rose from the garden, like she was the owner of it. It was at that moment that the head council member came and took me away. Since then, the council member said that he will no longer try to interfere with His Highness's personal life and that I should stop. "Which roses are you talking about?" the king asked, intrigued. He had even stopped tapping his finger, paying more attention to Yvonne. It was a transparent bush of roses but one turned black when I touched it. It must have been enchanted. Yvonne explained, confused. "Did the other woman touch it also?" he asked hurriedly. "Yes, when she stopped me from touching them. She also briefly touched it." "What color did it turn into?" he asked even more quickly than before. "I think it was a light blue." Why Yvonne tried to ask, but stopped herself, looking up to see the king's face. His ethereal beauty had transformed into a demonic, dangerous one. She could hardly breathe in his presence, just like when he choked her neck before. But he had not moved a muscle to step down from his throne. He had not attacked her in the slightest. Her breathing was suppressed because of the terrifying aura he released, an aura that made her plummet to the ground in terror. At the academy, Friday evening. It was already Friday. The time had sped up since their alpha returned to the academy. The pack members were thrilled to have her in their midst again, but their mood was slightly dampened when she informed them that she would still be living at the royal palace in the weekends. It was a courtesy His Highness had shown to her, a courtesy they wished he would have kept to himself. The weekends were a time they spent together deepening their bonds, going out to the city for a ride and some fun. Now it meant they could only see her from Monday to Friday, but, considering how much time they spent training and learning in that time, they would not have any time to socialize and just hang out with her. So their mood was sour, especially Jake's. He had taken it the hardest. She had explained to them a bit that there were unavoidable circumstances that kept her in the palace before, and that was also why she should still go live there. But she had not explained too much, and they also did not pry because of her introvert personality, seeing her off to the door. The pack members were returning to their rooms a bit upset, and no one had the mood to go play outside. Jake even more so, as he had felt a man's distinct smell on her the time she returned, a familiar smell that he knew the king possessed. The smell was so mixed with her own strawberry one that it did not seem like it was just from meeting him briefly in the palace. At that moment, it sent an alarm to his mind, but he had refrained from showing such emotions on his face. Still, it did not mean he did not feel hurt in his heart. He had been the one to see her first. He had been the one to discover her loveliness first. But he knew for a fact that she respected a lot the mating bond, and she would never accept his feelings. Not that he tried to show them openly to her. He was scared to break the friendship they currently had. He was scared of her rejection, because of a possible mate that existed out there for him. He was certain that Celia no longer had a mate. He had sensed it had to do something to why she had returned quickly to the academy before, and confirmed it when he had inadvertently listened to a small part of a conversation she once had on the telephone with her brother, a secret he had never told anyone. But even though she no longer had a mate, she would never accept him, the one who had not met his mate yet. And even if he didn't, he rejected his mate for her. It would make no difference. It would most likely incur her despising him, rather than accept him. He was unfortunately in a deadlock. He could not win against the king, who at least had no mate for 100 years, and was unlikely to have one at all, as perhaps something happened to his mate before he managed to find her, and Celia would not have a problem being with him. As such, the king was already in a more of an advantageous position than him. He sighed, opening his bedroom door, his heart hurting because of the helplessness of his situation. Closing the door as he entered, the image that appeared in his eyes stunned him out of his unhappy thoughts. He was so surprised that he could not even react to the unexpected thief. Could he call her a thief? What kind of a thief would wear Lolita Gothic-styled clothes and sit comfortably in the middle of the bed chewing bubblegum? She even had a pair of headphones on her ears and was by the music, singing along with it with her eyes closed. Had someone actually lost a kid, and she found her way to his room accidentally? But his room was obviously locked before. Still looking at her, a ball of fur tapped his little paw on her leg, trying to get her attention. Only then did she finally open her eyes and look towards the door. After seeing the small cat pointing towards it, the small beauty frowned at Jake's appearance. She was as confused as him. To see him in this room. Who are you? A question Jake believed was one that he should have been the one entitled saying. Not her. I am a student at the academy. But who are you? And why are you in my room? He returned the words to her. Oh, did I enter the wrong window? My mistake. She giggled, getting up from the bed. The cat sighed and swayed its head from side to side, following her towards the window. Did it waning say Celia's room was on the 3rd floor? Second room on the right, the petite woman asked herself, as she took the letter out of her pocket. She was as ditzy as ever, the small kid thought, but did not voice her thoughts. Oh, it was the left. She replied to her own question and was about to exit the open window, where a hand pulled her back. Who are you? And why are you looking for our Alpha? Jake asked, upset and wary of the person. What has it got to do with you? Asked the woman, a little annoyed at the fact that she could not budge the tall man's hand, and remove her hand from his grasp. What do you mean, what has it got to do with me? You entered my dorm room, and now you are the one asking questions, Jack asked, angered, getting closer to the small witch. Hey, let go of my hand, shouted Clarissa, getting angrier. What if I don't? Kid, answer the question first, kid. How dare you say I am a kid? Asked Clarissa, upset that the taboo matter was touched. No one called her a kid. How dare he call the leader of all the covens, the highest ranking witch alive? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If you are not a kid, then who is? Jack asked, a little amused. Even though he was still angry, he could not help it. Her pouting cheeks made him act to annoy her father. Listen here, little pup. No one, absolutely no one calls me a kid, Clarissa said, also getting closer to him, feeling it was such a pity as his cocky attitude did not suit his beautiful appearance and the delicious bubblegum smell that she could sense from him. Order to you, teeny mandatum. Clarissa spouted her spell, a spell that made Jake freeze, like he was waiting for her commands. Transform into your wolf, little pup, Clarissa continued, glad that he was now obedient, as he should be. Unwillingness was all you could tell from Jake's face, but forced to listen to the witch's command, he had no choice but to do so. He had not been weary of her being a witch. What kind of a witch dressed and acted like her? He never met one, but in his head he assumed a witch would be an old lady with a crooked nose, dressed in black clothes with a pointy hat. Her appearance and the feeling of powerlessness she previously emitted fooled him, seeing the big wolf that was as tall as her, even though she was standing. Overjoyed Clarissa. Honestly, the grey wolf with golden eyes was so much more beautiful and lovely than his human form. Sit, she said, just like one would tell a dog they trained. An action he again followed, although growling but otherwise obedient. Good little wolf, Clarissa said while standing on her toes, struggling to pet the head of the still giant wolf, although he was now sitting. Sometime later, At the mall inside the city, do we have to hold hands? Celia said, while looking at the hands Solas gingerly held. And not only held, even interlocked their fingers together. They were now walking around the mall, going to the promised date. Solas had insisted that they should have one today, and another date tomorrow, as he wanted to apologize for granting her wish only now, even though some time passed since the ball was held. An apology she did not ask for. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylène Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why, are you being shy? We have already slept together. This is only a small touch. Solas asked, cajoling her. You don't say that out loud. What if someone heard it? Celia asked, upset, and was already checking her surroundings, blushing hard. What are you thinking in that pretty little head of yours? I only meant we slept on the same bed, Solas chuckling stated, and with his other hand was pinching her small nose. Teasing her. You, why do you always have to twist my words? Celia asked, upset and pouting, an action that delighted him. He was pleased that she getting more and more comfortable with him, that she was even beginning to voice her real inner thoughts. Chapter 43. The solution. Their first date was interrupted. Shortly after it began, they had not walked around for half an hour, when Jake called Celia. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylène Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Solas was a bit bothered by the call. All right, jealous of it. But the importance behind the call washed such feelings away. So without either of them feeling regretful for the short date, they made their way to the royal palace, where they had agreed to meet with Clarissa, the one who made Jake call them, but which also had enough of fun playing with Jake in wolf form and released her spell on him. Before leaving, having accomplished her goal, she was anxious to see if the ring would work. Lilo had told her that the ring was indeed capable of holding and transferring a spirit, but it had only housed a tiger's spirit until now. Would it also work for a wolf soul? She was about to find out, escorted by the guards who had been waiting for her by the gates. This time, Clarissa followed the normal route to enter a place. She was coming to the palace, so even if she wanted to, it was more difficult to breach than the dormitory building was. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylène Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The puppy which happily ran towards her friend, and as she got near her, jumped and tightly hugged her. If one were to see them, they would no doubt think that Celia was the more mature of the two. But in fact, she was much younger than Clarissa was. Celia warmly hugged the witch, happy to see her. Her lively presence was contagious. They exchanged only a little bit of pleasantry before touching the important matter, as it was what mattered the most. Celia had also not asked Clarissa why the witch helped her, as Clarissa told her she would reveal it to her some day on her own accord. Well, here it is. My solution, Clarissa said happily as she presented the small box in the palm of her hand. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylène Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Asked Celia, looking at the box in which was stored a small silver ring with a ruby red stone embedded in the center of it. Yet this ring belongs to my friend, a pure-blood vampire. In it already resides a white tiger, but there should be enough room for another soul, at least for some time, said Clarissa, hopeful of the solution. But both Solas and Celia looked towards her, not understanding a thing. How would the ring help Crescent, the small cat at the side? Clarissa was a nerd at whatever she was researching, and she was a genius at everything she did. But she had two major problems. One, she had no sense of direction. The small cat doubted that she could even find her way back home if she was not with her. Two, she never explained to everyone's understanding. Being the genius that she was, she felt like everyone would understand like her no matter what words she used, without too many explanations. The ring in Clarissa's hand is a vessel. The small ruby at the center can actually host the souls of spirits who have lost their original bodies. If one wears the ring, is all her soul can't transfer to the ring, and effectively prevent them from dying, and as another person would wear the ring after the first person, her or his soul could possess the new body, explained the small cat. Instead of hurt its owner. The original use of it was in fact to curse a person, at least that was its initial purpose. But in case of spirits, it can also help to store them. You see, if a person who has 3 souls wears it, the ring would absorb first the weakest of them, and that would be Crescent Soul. Because for 1, her power is lower of course, and for 2, she does not belong to your body, so she is the easiest to snatch in a sense. Continued the small cat. But Ebony, if Crescent transfers to the ring, would she remain there? Celia asked, scared of that happening. Crescent was a wolf. She was meant to have a human counterpart, a partner. What would be the difference between Crescent now, who was dormant, and being in a ring? No, she would not be able to. As Clarissa said, the ring already has a tiger's soul in it. We promised Clarissa's friend we would only use the ring to transfer the wolf's soul, and then return it to her. The tiger is very important to her and would get damaged if the 2 would stay in the same place. Something like what is happening now in your own mind. The ring is meant for only 1 soul normally, just like the wolf's place in your mind is made for 1 wolf. One of the 2 would get hurt in the long term. The purpose, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, is for you to wear the ring until the center stone turns blue. At that moment, Crescent would have successfully transferred to the ring. Then we will have another person wear it and effectively transfer the soul to the new person. Ebony, the black cat, explained. She was as smart as her owner, but had more common sense than the latter, and could explain what her owner could not. Yet that's the gist of it. Clarissa added, as if she was the one who explained, to whom we would transfer Crescent. Another werewolf? Celia asked. She was a bit relieved, but not totally. Her most important wolf could not just be handed to another werewolf, and also the other werewolf would have to accept her also. Not the same problem would occur again. If we did that, one of the wolves would suffer. The person who could house Crescent would have to be able to host a wolf, but not have one already. Only a hybrid could have her. Ebony explained further. You mean, a being born from a human and a werewolf? But I do not know of any hybrids. There are none in the kingdom. Solos added. He was the king, he would know. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His words worried Celia again, but fortunately the cheery wit resolved even this part of the problem. Enthusiasm, in the werewolf kingdom there are not. But we never said that it should be a crossing of a werewolf and a human. It can also be a crossing of a werewolf and a witch. Is there such a person? Solos asked, intrigued. It was new information to him, yet yours truly, Clarissa said cheerfully, pointing to herself. You. Both Celia and Solos asked together, surprised yes. After my father's mate died, he met my mother, a witch, and this beautiful witch was created. Clarissa appreciated herself. Proud. Yes, Clarissa should be able to have Crescent in her mind. Ebony also added, as the witch's words were not easily trustable. Not only because of Clarissa's childish face and bubbly personality, her proudness also did not help. But if she is a hybrid, how is she so powerful as a witch? She is the leader of the covens. Shouldn't her power be halved because of the mixed blood? Solos asked, a little distrustful of his fact. He knew of the witch, and he was aware that Clarissa, even if only recently, became the leader of the covens. Based on her power alone, she should have been made the leader a long time ago. But, interested more in research, the witch never wanted to take on something as bothersome as leading, as it would take too much time from the time she dedicated to her potions. She is mostly witch, because whenever a werewolf would breed with another creature, the hybrid that would result would almost never be a werewolf. It would inherit the genes predominantly of the other creature. Just like Clarissa, she is mostly witch, but still having Crescent in her mind should pose no problems, as she has a wolf's place, but no wolf in it. Only then did Celia finally sigh relieved. handing Crescent over to Clarissa. Other than her, she would not know of a better host. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Then shall we test the ring? Clarissa asked. Celia nodded and took the ring out of its box, before putting it on. Once she slid it on her finger, the ring magically resized itself to fit her size. Is it working? Turning the ring on all sides to check it. It will not work immediately. There are a few conditions. 1. You will have to wear it until it turns blue. But this will happen slowly. It could take up to a month or 2. The stone will begin to turn blue around the edges, until the blue color will reach the center. 2. You cannot remove the ring until it turns blue. For any reason whatsoever. Her soul could possibly be torn apart if you do so. And 3. The most important thing to take notice of. In this time you cannot use Waning's power. It will interrupt the flow of magic of the ring, and it will also affect Crescent's state anyway. This could also cause Crescent to vanish. Ebony explained the graveness of the situation. Celia nodded and looked again at the ring. A little tiny bit of blue could already be seen. It was only a little, and she could only see it because of her keen eyesight. But it was a hopeful solution. So then, we don't have more to do than just wait? Asked Solas, already thinking of calling the academy. He had to find a reason to limit the trainings the Watchers did, to avoid Sia from using her werewolf power. Yes, when the stone turns blue, Waning can wake Crescent up and she will see some sort of portal. As Lot explained, once she jumps in the portal, the ring would have engulfed her all. Then Clarissa will wear the ring and will do the reverse process. In some other place. At the same time, are you the hunter that returned alone from the royal forest? About a month ago. If my memory serves me right, you informed your superiors that the king had returned earlier than scheduled, and had caught all of you off guard. Right? Asked the blonde man, rhythmically tapping his fingers. Why, yes, my king, answered the hunter, already sweating. He was scared because he was summoned, just as he thought his lie had successfully fooled his superiors, barely escaping with his life from the savageness of that young woman. He had hidden the truth until now. How could he say that the entire group of hunters was single-handedly decimated by one little werewolf woman? No one would have believed him. Even less, because of the fact that she had been shot but many times with wolfsbane bullets. Bullets that had been researched for many years, doubling their deadliness. Would he have said that? Perhaps he would have died by this man's at that time, just for announcing the failed research result. Fortunately at that time, scouts posted outside had seen Solas's car enter the royal palace shortly after the attack, and the other hunters had mistaken him as the one responsible. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He did not contradict them, and even affirmed their beliefs. If he had known he would one day be summoned by this man, he would have never lied. But now he could nothing than stick with his original story, because if this man realized he had lied, he would die today for certain. So then why did I hear today that in fact your whole group was killed by one little werewolf female? The man asked calmly. That is not. The hunter, trembling, tried to reply. Say another lie and you will lose your head. The king informed him. He really was in no mood to torture someone, and with his patience he was unlikely to torture him. He would kill him swiftly, more likely, left with no choice, especially after knowing the king was aware of the truth. He recounted that day's happenings. What an interesting woman, the king thought, as expected of the werewolf king's mate. Enthusiasm, indeed the old lady up in the sky favored the king of the werewolves. Even his mate was perfectly engineered for him. He really did hate her a lot. How partial was she? He had initially thought that she had abandoned the king, and even left him without a mate. Because of the distant past, 100 years had passed and Solas had no mate. Was it to make his mate even more perfect for him? To ensure the chosen queen of the werewolves was flawless? But then why did Solis not announce her identity until now? Why had he not marked her yet? If Solas did, Then Yvonne would have known of it. Why, you said. You would. Not kill me, the hunter painfully said. These were possibly his last words. No, these were his last words. As his body fell lifeless in a pool of blood, I said, you will not lose your head. Whoever said, I will not kill you? The king replied, looking at the now dead body. Upset, his thoughts were rudely interrupted. Now then, I hope you will not have unfortunate news for me. Like this gentleman here. Doctor, the king asked, wiping his bloodied hand on a handkerchief. Your Majesty, although the hunter just said the alpha has survived the bullets of wolfsbane, I can assure you they truly are as potent as we promised. The captured werewolves proved so. Even the strongest the hunters caught died after 2 bullets of wolfsbane. The only reasonable motive for why she survived is her rank. Perhaps she's closer to the 2nd rank. We've never tried it on such a powerful werewolf before, explained the doctor. As opposed to the hunter from before, he was more composed. He had never lied to this man, and this man still needed him as well. I do not doubt that, Doctor. Otherwise you would already be accompanying this hunter to the netherworld. I am more interested in the other research. Time is pressing us. Unfortunately, the doctor stiffened a bit at his comment, but still answered coherently the question. In another year or so, the venom should be fully rid of all of its defects, the doctor said, proud. It was 2 full years earlier than what he had promised. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. At what percentage is it now? The king asked, tapping his fingers, thinking. It is at 25-1 and for subject survives. It's good enough. By the end of the week, I want 1-0 successful subjects. But Your Highness, we do not have that many candidates available. We would need at least 3.0 candidates or more. At present, there are only 2 who survived the venom, and are waiting to be tested. We only have 2,000 more. We are still lacking 1,000 candidates at least. The doctor explained, confused. He did not understand why the man hurried. Not to mention he obtained 100 successful specimens in a year, and the king wanted 800 more in just 5 days. The venom was ready, and there was enough of it. But how many were necessary to be sacrificed? You will not lack specimens. Doctor, just start with what you have first. Lucian, gather the materials the doctor needs. Also bring the which you have left. She should still be of use. Even without her sister, he commanded one of the 2 bulky men, who were also in the room. Yes, my king, but if I gather that many, I will not be able to do so undetected, Lucian said, already needing to confirm his order. They had moved almost undetected all these years. They had gathered strays mostly. 1,000 missing people would attract anyone's attention on them, no matter how skillfully they collected them. It does not matter. It would be better to leave some tracks. We need some hounds on our tracks. The king dismissed his worries. He had used hunters and rogues until now, to mislead the werewolves, but there was no need to keep on tricking them. This would be the last time he used a diversion. The presence of the king's mate already changed the situation significantly. He would not give Sulla's time to mark her, and become even more powerful than now. As always, confirming the order, the man named Lucian did not wait longer and followed the doctor out of the door, dragging behind him the body of the hunter. It seemed they could finally play to their heart's content, without fear. They would truly have some fun, the bulky man thought. The king asked the other man, who was already waiting, kneeled for the command. How long has it been since you last saw your brother? I think it's about time to pay him a visit. His real self has been sleeping for long enough already, the king said thoughtfully towards his most trusted aide. They were forced to move up their plans in light of the new information, but there were also bright sides to the situation. Indeed it has, Your Highness. For you to permit his return, he will be overjoyed. Cain bowed even more his head, in obedience. His brother had suffered long enough. 30 years had passed since they last saw each other, with his brother having his memory intact. I will be happy to have my third aid return as well. It has been like losing one of my limbs. Take the crystal with his memories with you. You can restore them at the academy. There is no need to wait until you come back to do so. Yes, Your Highness. Thank you. My king, before I go, can I be presumptuous and ask you something? Cain asked humble. He had no fear of the king. As Lucian, he and his brother had been the longest with him, but nevertheless he still asked for permission. Of course you can, the king replied calm, and waited for his aide's question. He had even stopped tapping his fingers to pay attention. Why did you let the werewolf woman go? She has lost all her value to you. Why did you not tie the loose ends? She could pose a problem. If she talks of us. Cain expressed his worries. He knew his king never did something without thoroughly think of it, even if it did not seem so at times. But he still wanted to know. She told me that the 2 hunters that were captured were interrogated by Solar successfully. The king gave a hint to his aide, but that is not possible. The hunters were under a spell. If they were to ever be interrogated even under torture, then would only ramble a bit then kill themselves, before something usable would be extracted from them. Cain exclaimed confused. This was one of the reasons they were not worried about the captured hunters in the first place. I never bothered to silence them. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It seems that Sola still has the complete loyalty of his council. The king smirked coldly. Then she was fooled by her own grandfather. She was told fake information. Cain deduced. Well, perhaps not exactly so. They must have realized, when the attack took place, that we have some people on the inside. So everyone who knew of the king not being in his palace, other than his council members, were fed fake information. Whatever traveled outside from one individual would help them determine the informant. Most likely, even the council members' families are not excluded from this rule. Yvonne has failed her grandfather's test. We do not need to do a thing. Her grandfather would take care of her. Not to mention, she doesn't not know too much of our origin. She never did. She truly believed that I only needed her just to have an ally on the werewolf throne. Nothing else. Poor thing. Truly stupid poor thing. The information she told me over the years were enough for payment for the favor I did back then. The king chuckled. But even so, how would they know she told us? We have magical barriers all around. She did not have a single spell on her for them to trace her. Who knows? It did not matter that much to me to check. Now, if your curiosity is satisfied, go and prepare. At the end of this week you will meet your brother. Cain nodded and rose on his feet to go rile up his men. The king stopped him, just before he opened the door to leave. The latter immediately turned around, waiting for his words. When you go to the academy to retrieve your brother, please bring another person from there for me, will you?